I want to start with a feeling you might recognize. You work, you earn, you save a little, you pay taxes, and somehow, every year, it still feels like you're running uphill. Meanwhile, you hear stories about people who are clearly wealthier than you, yet seem to pay less tax, borrow massive amounts of money without stress, and somehow never feel squeezed the way you do. And it leaves you with this quiet question you don't always say out loud. What game are they playing that I'm not? Today, I want to talk about a concept that often gets mentioned in finance circles with an almost mythical tone, not because it's secret, but because it sounds so different from how most of us were taught to think about money. It's often summarized in three words: buy, borrow, die. And before that triggers skepticism or frustration, let me say this clearly up front. This isn't about tricks, it's not about shortcuts, and it's definitely not about copying billionaire behavior tomorrow. This is about understanding how wealth actually behaves over time, and why the rules feel so different depending on which side of the system you're standing on. Most people misunderstand this idea because they hear it as a tactic, as if there's a checklist somewhere that says, do this, then you're rich. But buy, borrow, die isn't really a strategy in the way most people think about strategies. It's a description of how the financial system treats assets versus income. And once you understand that difference, a lot of confusion around money starts to make sense. Most of us are raised inside a very simple mental model. You earn money, you pay tax on that money, you spend what's left. If you're disciplined, you save a little. This model works. It keeps the lights on. It rewards consistency. But it also comes with a ceiling, especially emotionally, because no matter how careful you are, income always feels fragile. It stops when you stop, and it's taxed before it ever reaches you. The people who benefit from buy, borrow, die aren't playing that same income-first game. They're playing an asset-first game, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else in finance. Let's slow this down. When you buy something like a car, it usually loses value. When you buy groceries, the value disappears immediately. When you buy experiences, the value is emotional, not financial. But when wealthy people talk about buying, they usually mean buying assets, things that tend to hold value or grow over time. Businesses, real estate, shares in productive companies, intellectual property. Assets are different from income because the system treats them differently. Income is taxed when it shows up. Assets are mostly taxed when you sell them. And that one distinction quietly shapes everything that follows. Here's where borrowing enters the picture, and this is where things usually sound unfair. Let's say someone owns an asset that's worth $1 million. They didn't earn $1 million this year, they just own something that has grown to that value over time. If they sell it, they create income. That usually triggers taxes. But if instead they borrow against it, something very different happens. A loan isn't considered income, it's debt, and debt in most systems isn't taxed, so they can access cash without earning it in the traditional sense. Now pause here for a moment, because this is the part that often creates resentment. It feels like cheating, but from the system's perspective, it's logical. The lender feels safe because the asset backs the loan. The borrower gets liquidity, and no income was technically created. This isn't a loophole in the shadows, it's a feature of how capital markets function. And it exists because assets are seen as stable, productive, and long-term. That's why this strategy isn't really available to most people early in life, not because of intelligence, but because assets take time to build. The final word, die, is the most uncomfortable one, and it's also the most misunderstood. People hear it and think it means avoiding responsibility forever. What it actually points to is how long-term ownership changes the tax conversation entirely. In many systems, assets passed on at death are treated differently than assets sold during life. The value resets. Unrealized gains often disappear from a tax perspective. Generations move forward without triggering the same tax events that income would have caused year after year. Again, this isn't about copying outcomes, it's about understanding incentives. The system rewards long-term ownership far more than short-term earning. And once you see that, something important happens psychologically. You stop blaming yourself for feeling stuck. Because most people aren't failing at money, they're just playing a game optimized for stability, not leverage.
And there's nothing wrong with stability. In fact, it's essential. But it helps to know which game you're in. Here's where the story turns and where this becomes useful rather than frustrating. You don't need to use buy, borrow, die to benefit from understanding it. What you need is the mindset behind it. The mindset is simple, but not easy. Stop thinking only in terms of income. Start thinking in terms of ownership. That shift alone changes behavior. It changes how you view saving, investing, and time. Instead of asking, how do I make more money this year? The question becomes, what can I slowly own that works even when I'm tired? That might be a retirement account invested consistently over decades. It might be learning skills that allow you to build something scalable. It might be a business or a small piece of one. For most people, the real application isn't borrowing millions. It's realizing that assets reduce pressure in ways income never can. Assets give you optionality. They let you wait. They let you say no. They let you breathe. And that's the emotional core of this entire idea. Wealth isn't about spending more. It's about needing less urgency. When you understand that, a lot of common money stress starts to loosen its grip. You stop expecting your paycheck to do everything. You stop panicking when progress feels slow. You stop comparing yourself to outcomes without seeing timelines. Practically, this means focusing on boring, patient behavior long before it feels rewarding. It means building buffers. It means valuing ownership over appearances. It means understanding that financial peace usually comes from what you don't need to do anymore, not from what you can finally afford. And no, this doesn't mean ignoring bills, responsibilities, or reality. It means recognizing that the system favors people who think in decades, not months. If you take anything from this, let it be this. The reason buy, borrow, die sounds so powerful is because it reflects how the system treats capital. But the real advantage comes much earlier, long before borrowing or passing anything on. It starts the moment you stop measuring progress only by income and start measuring it by how much of your future you quietly own. You don't have to win the game overnight. You just have to stop playing the wrong one by default. And right now, if all you can do is understand this, that's already progress, because clarity reduces anxiety, and progress doesn't require perfection. It just requires direction.